and welcome to the Built on Air podcast. Built on Air is a regular podcast where we talk with everyday people and learn about the amazing things they are doing with Airtable. Today's podcast is sponsored by OpenSide, the leading solutions provider for Airtable customers. Check out openside.com to learn more about their products and services that can take your Airtable usage to the next level. Use promo code BuiltOnAir to receive $20 towards any product purchase. In this episode, I speak with Melanie Magdalena, scientist, creator, web designer, developer, and self-proclaimed unicorn. Melanie works with nonprofits and entrepreneurs to simplify their workflows using no-code solutions. After kicking off her career in archaeology, life took her in a different direction, and she started using her technological knowledge to build platforms to help her day-to-day work life. Today, she resides in Austin, Texas, and is a co-founder of Deytah, a digital consulting service helping small businesses to solve their data problems. Together with her co-founders, they recently released Automation Academy, where users can sign up to check out their automation recipes. In today's episode, Melanie showcases the base she created to calculate the scores of student assessments, and details an extremely creative way to get the data she needs in the right spots. Find her online at melaniemagdalena.com and on various platforms as M2 Creates.
Oh, I think now if you want to share your screen, that would be great.
Alrighty, let's do it. I'm going to actually start with this part here, so I can just walk you through how this base works.
Awesome.
So there are 5 tables, and everything starts out with customers, and then customers have orders. So they buy how many of these auditions they want to do, basically. And then whenever one is submitted by a student to get graded, it goes here. And whenever the instructor goes and grades it, it goes into scores. And then all of this is consolidated into students, because the end goal of this whole project was not only to move it off of paper, but the second part was everybody else in the company needs to be able to just look up a student and know what they have.
Right.
So we needed a place to put it so that you could be like, oh, so-and-so says that they didn't get their certificate. Which certificate should they have? They need this one, this one, this one, and this one. Done.
Right.
So this is what the base looks like. This is all sample data. So in here, I have, in my customers, we have 3 different people. Their purchaser ID is in the real world connected to Infusionsoft, so that we can keep track of who in Infusionsoft is buying everything. Their orders come from Shopify and are rolled up so that we can see how many they have purchased and redeemed. Because you're not allowed to redeem more than what you've purchased. So that's just a check, so you can keep track of that. And orders is fairly similar. It's got the order ID, which comes from Shopify, when they bought it, how much they got. That's the number that gets rolled up in customers. And then we have auto-created time and current time, so that if you want to, you can do some math between these and follow up. It's like, hey, it's been like 60 days since you bought this. Would you like to send us anything? Follow up, make sure people don't forget that they paid a lot of money for something. And if you want, I can show you a diagram of how that data gets here.
Yes, that'd be great.
Cool. So there's a handful of automations that go into this that make the world go round. So like I said, we have Shopify, which is the starting point in this world. We've got an autofulfill plugin installed on Shopify that basically creates a CSV in Google Drive of all of the new orders, and then we manipulate that CSV that it sends out at whatever interval we happen to put it at. And Zapier takes all of those new orders and decides that it's going to make a new file, and then it imports that CSV and it creates the rows accordingly. Then, due to trigger limitations, we got a second Zap that goes, there's a new row, cool, what do we do? Step 1, you transform all of your email addresses to lowercase or you're going to have a bad time.
Yes.
Text transform is also your best friend. Then in Airtable, we find or create a record for them because if they're new, they will need a new record. If they're old, they will have a record, which we make sure we account for case sensitivity of who typed in the email address and always use lowercase.
Yes.
Once the customer is taken care of, obviously these include fill-in fields as we go. Once we have the customer ready, then we go to that orders table, make a new record for the order, then do what I mentioned earlier and go back to the customer table and find them again so we can get their finished data. And then we're generating a random number that we're actually adding to Infusionsoft for one of its peculiarities, and then updating the contact over there with, they bought this, and here's their new tags and all of the good marketing side of it.
Awesome. I love that graphic too. It's really clear and concise.
Nice. So then come the submissions, which are going to start. This is when students get involved. So now that students don't have to mail in a piece of paper with some postage, in the learning dashboard, it's run through WordPress and uses a plugin called Memberium, which is basically memberships for Infusionsoft in a WordPress environment. And with Memberium and Gravity Forms, we're able to create nice little custom forms that are relevant to the one person who's entering stuff.
Awesome.
So let's go here. So in Memberium, student signs in, types out all of their details, includes a link to YouTube, or says, I'm still mailing you a DVD or USB or whatever, because sometimes you have to do that. That's fine.
Right.
And whenever they submit it, we have a notification that goes to the instructor with a pre-filled form link for Airtable.
Okay.
So the email has all of the criteria that they're supposed to know that they're grading against. And then using Airtable's pre-filling URL shenanigans, we add in the email address of the student, what they're competing for, all of that good stuff.
Right.
And then we're also creating the row in the database, which follows the same path of there's a new entry, this uses Zapier, transform the email to lowercase, find student this time, because who purchased it is not necessarily who's using it.
Right.
And then we're creating the record with what all they did, find the customer associated with who paid for it, so we count it as redeemed. And then we generate another random number that goes into Infusionsoft and updates that world of things. So basically, we end up with this lovely collection of data, which is fairly straightforward. There's not much magic happening in the submission world. It's basically just a in-between, let's pause, get everything collected, and then, let's see if I have a sample form. So this is basically the form that gets included for the instructor so that they can see what they're supposed to be grading on, and they consult the email they were given of, here's all of that. And this is where I said that they just need to just pick who is grading this.
You don't need your own record.
Yep. So the interesting thing about handling form fills, though, is that, like I said, you always want to use record IDs.
Right.
But in this case, you can't.
Right.
At least not easily. So what happened was we actually created text fields for handling email and the ID of the submission that get pre-filled, and then in Zapier it copies that data into the linked record.
Okay.
So that it resyncs with all of the other tables.
Ah.
It's kind of weird, but it works.
No, absolutely.
So whenever they submit this, it basically creates what's called the score record. And the score record is where things actually start getting very interesting. So here you can see the fallback link record, because we need it to be connected to the submission table and to the student, because this is our end goal data. We need to know what these are so we can aggregate them.
Right.
And from here, let's go back to, so we got our scores. It creates those links I mentioned. And then one of the things that's going on behind the scenes at this point is, like, as far as human interaction goes, we stop here. So what we need to do is say which type of award they ended up getting and send that to the appropriate individual at the company so that they can do that.
Right.
So that makes use of Zapier's paths to notify of, here's their shipping info, and please make sure you send them a certificate or a ribbon or an email or something.
Right.
Meanwhile, now my biggest goal here, and the part that took the longest, was figuring out how to take all of these scores and display the newest, highest score for each category for one student.
All right. That sounds like a challenge.
So for those watching this is the simplified view of what these look like. There's a lot more columns here.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of math that happens. So, for example, let's say that let's start with, so scores on here are selects. Okay. What if they actually they're basically competing for a certain level, and then the score either is how well they did or the fact that they tried to compete for something that was too high, so they didn't qualify for it yet. But in this particular scenario, the scores are kind of silly or funny. I don't know. They're peculiar. You can't necessarily fail.
Okay.
You either do okay, you do good, or you do great.
Okay.
So for the level you're competing at, let's say it's level 1, you can get a 1, a 1 plus, or a 1 plus plus.
All right.
And that is the internal grading system, and that is what we have to show customer support. What did they get? Like that.
Okay. I'm with you.
You can't roll those up very easily.
No.
You can't really roll those up in any legible way. Right. So I'm just going to hide a few of these columns real quick so that we can walk through how you get this number. So, like, let's take student A here. Student A got a 4 plus in math in my particular scenario here, versus their original 3.
Okay.
So in students, if we go look at math, you will see that it has the 4 plus and 4 plus's date, which I will put the date back so that you can see exactly where that, I don't know why I hit that one. So there's that date. So how do you roll up a select field and a date when there are multiples, and just keep the one that you want? So we start with what I created called a level index. So basically it looks at this first select and goes, if the level says level 1, then this means 1. And we'd start turning into things into plain numbers.
Right.
We use those plain numbers to cross-check their full score that they're going to get here, because this needs to be used to tell whoever is shipping things that here's what we got. Let's send them what they need. So this is just the nested if statement for, let's see, 16 of them. There's 16 of them because there are 4 subjects and 4 levels for each. And it basically checks that level index and what this score was to determine which thing should be going in here.
Right.
Now, we also want to make sure that nothing went wrong and that they actually got the award for it. So this simply checks, is there a date? Yes. Fantastic. That means you got an award.
Perfect.
So now we have to turn these little pluses into something that's useful, which is what I call the level score. And the level score does not fit in this tiny little window. So if we come over here, this is the same as in here, I believe. This is the other one I did. So this is simple. I didn't actually copy this one out. Oh boy, here we go. Just to show you how big this is.
No, of course.
So each of these takes that score value, that's the select, cross-checks it against the level index, because I'm using an and. It's like both of these have to be true. And if so, this is going to be worth 10.
Right.
Whereas the other one is 11, and the third one is 12, and so on and so forth. So I basically took the college method. It's like 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, 400 level. Let's give these all a value.
I like it.
So for each of the subjects, then we do a score check against that, which just takes that and adds 100 to it.
Okay.
It verifies that they did get the award, that the subject is the same subject, the level index meets a certain criteria, and it adds 100 to it.
Okay.
Once you can have all of that, and you duplicate that for each of them and just make sure you label it nicely. We have this is the clean version of where you can just see those last 2. But if you want those, we now calculate max score. This is where roll-ups come in, which is exciting.
Yes.
So the first portion of a max score is just go use my score check on a subject and find the max value.
Right.
Easy peasy. No big deal. And then we want to reparse that back into the original score now that we've moved it between tables, which looks something like this, where we take that max score, and if max equals that 100 level number, then it has no pluses or 1 or 2 and so on and so forth.
Right.
And that's how you get these ones across.
Perfect.
How do you get date?
Right.
Do you have any ideas on how you get date? I'm just curious.
I would do something with rolling them up and matching them against the score check somehow, but then that might not work because you might have the same score twice for a student, right? Exactly.
So the way I figured out how to roll up a date to get my match was using Unix timestamps.
All right.
So this date, again, let's look at this one that had math, was May 17th. So you can convert May 17th, 2019 to Unix, which gives you pure numbers and nothing else. But it will technically still count it as a string.
Right.
It's really hard to roll up things that aren't numbers.
Yes.
So date check, which is the equivalent, checks the normal criteria, and then we convert the datetime format to Unix as a value. So it becomes a pure number. Numbers you can roll up.
Yes.
So over here, we get to get our max value again. Simple. Then, this is another one I don't believe fits in the box. Oh, it does. Here we go. And then you make sure it's not 0.
Mm-hmm.
Then you date time parse it back into Unix for the time zone.
Okay.
And then you convert it again to month, date, year.
Right.
So it takes 4 columns between 2 tables. Actually, 5 columns if you include the original date one. But you can go from date to Unix to number to date to proper formatted human readable date once more.
Right. Oh my goodness.
And the result is really cool because now you can see at a glance the highest score with its respective date for each of the subjects. Because what could happen and what I needed to prevent was, what if you did it once and then decided you wanted to try again?
Right.
Because you can do that. So in one of my samples, I've included how student B here tried once and got a 1+. But then they tried at a later date and got a 1. Well, we want to give them the higher score because that was the best one out of them.
Right.
So they get to keep it. They get to keep their higher score, which is cool.
No,
and then at the end of the day, all of this goes back into Infusionsoft using the last modified. If it's modified, it goes into a new view, hit Zapier, goes into Infusionsoft, and it updates all of their final scores from the table.
That's awesome.
So now support can see the data they need, shipping gets the info they need, instructors have exactly what they need to do their job, and as long as nobody changes their email address, it works perfectly.
Right. That's the one thing I worry about with using emails as like the unique identifier, because I mean, this will happen across any unique identifier, but most people can't type their email address. It's so funny how many errors I get with like.
Oh, and you'll notice here that my student ID is hyphenated to include their name, because
that'll help.
We discovered that multiple students can belong to the same customer and share the same email address.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's
So yeah, that was an interesting formula to figure. It's like, how do I make sure that they're absolutely 100% unique? But that also has its own flaws, because what if they add an extra space in their name?
Exactly. And that's
so there's still a little bit of a human element, keep an eye on it. But
of course. No, that's awesome.
But yeah, basically it ended up being 19 years of data.
Oh my goodness.
For 6,000 students, 13,500 assessments, 7 little pieces of automation, 4 forms, and 1 base.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You definitely overcame some big challenges with that one. That's awesome.
Oh, I just hope it keeps working as intended. The future of this project is still slightly ongoing. The Airtable side of it is done. Now there's some work being done on actually populating that Infusionsoft data directly into the Memberium system, so that you can see real time. It's like, oh, the last one I did was in October, and I got this score. I haven't done these other 3 yet. I should go do that. So now it's the student incentivizing section of the project.
Well, that's awesome. And I mean, now you have all the data there for them to be able to access. So that's great. It makes it a lot easier for all parties involved.
Oh, yep. That's the goal.
Exactly.
Once the heavy lifting of figuring out what the format of things needs to be, it's easier to keep it all flowing in a less stressful manner.
Oh my gosh. No, that's awesome. Very impressive.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun building that, and I'm sure there's a lot of other use cases for it, because basically at the end of the day, it's someone did a test.
Mhm.
They did the same test multiple times. What was their best score and what day?
Right.
Or
And
which semester or which year or whatever.
of course. No, that's awesome. And that's a big I mean, especially if you don't have like a junction or a summary table, like sometimes trying to drag things from table to table is just difficult in some ways, trying to set up the linking relationships correctly. It looks like you did a really good job with that.
Oh, it definitely went through at least 3 iterations before we got it right.
Yeah, of course. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's really cool. Well, thank you so much for showing me that. And
Yeah, absolutely.
that's great. And so we'll put your website and everything in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to have people know?
I'm Melanie from Deytah. We create beautiful, simple solutions, whether that's data, design, or development. We like working with nonprofits and small businesses to just help you get your job done. At the end of the day, the best experience is an experience that users can use, but people forget about internal users. The fact that you work for a company means that you should also have an elegant way of doing your job. And I think it's a lot of fun building stuff like this to help people do that.
I couldn't agree more. And it looks like you do a good job of it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course.